Forget the bright lights of Gran Via and the museum crowds you know today. You're in the 1700s Madrid, and the air smells like coal, church incense, and smoke drifting out of the taverns on Cava Baja. Listen to the clatter of carriages over the uneven cobblestones, weaving their way through water carriers and town criers, while the royal Alcázar towers over a skyline of spires and domes. Suddenly, the silence is broken by the shout of a constable, and by scuffles that sometimes ended in violence in dark alleyways. Welcome to the court and capital of 18th century Spain, the city of corralas, traditional apartment buildings, the arrival of the Bourbon Dynasty, and a Madrid that, caught between the strict formality of the court and the rough and tumble life of its lower neighborhoods, was gearing up to be the political heart of a monarchy that was starting to lose its grip on Europe. On Reconstructed History, we travel through the eras and cities that shaped the world and give them a visual identity. Let's kick off this journey into the past. If you were walking through Madrid around the year 1725, you'd be entering a city that was changing, even if it wasn't always obvious. Just a few years earlier, the War of Spanish Succession had ended, and with it came a new dynasty to the throne, the Bourbons. This wasn't just a change of king, it was a deep shift in how the country was run, more centralization, more administrative control. Power started to concentrate in Madrid in a much more organized way, following models inspired by France. This meant more officials, more bureaucracy, and a city that became increasingly dependent on its political role. With a population of somewhere between 120,000 and 130,000 at the start of the 18th century, Madrid was already one of the biggest cities on the peninsula. But it had a major structural weakness. It didn't produce nearly enough to support itself. It depended on the outside world almost entirely. Every day, dozens of carts rolled into the city loaded with wheat, meat, wine, and other basic goods from Castile and neighboring areas. This supply system was fragile. All it took was a bad harvest or trouble on the roads for prices to skyrocket. The balance was unstable. The streets weren't designed for a growing capital. They were narrow, uneven, many of them left over from medieval times. In a lot of areas, two carriages couldn't even pass each other without trouble. And still, everything moved through them. People, animals, commerce. The housing situation clearly reflected social inequality. While the nobility lived in spacious houses with inner courtyards and better ventilation, most of the population was crammed into tenement buildings, several families sharing tiny spaces. In some cases, a single room served as a bedroom, kitchen, and living room all at once. Poor hygiene and lack of ventilation weren't the exception. They were the norm. Madrid just wasn't built for that kind of density. As you moved forward, you'd reach the Plaza Mayor, one of the busiest hubs in the city. It wasn't just a market. It was a multi-purpose space where commercial activity, public events, and even Inquisition auto de fe took place. This was where public life really happened. Daily supplies depended on a constant flow of goods. The city had no margin for error. When the supply chain failed, the impact was immediate. Prices went up, availability went down. The social structure was rigid. At the top were the nobility and the court, still the core of political power. But the context had changed. After the Habsburgs fell, Spain had lost some of its influence in Europe. Madrid was still the capital, but it no longer dominated on the world stage. Below the nobility, a new class of administrators was growing. The Bourbon administration needed more control, more records, more management. The state was becoming more present. Then came the artisans, merchants, and urban workers who kept the city running day to day. And at the bottom, a huge part of the population lived in precarious conditions. It's estimated that thousands of people relied on charity or odd jobs just to survive. Poverty wasn't occasional, it was structural. Religion was everywhere. Madrid had over 70 convents taking up a massive amount of urban space, plus countless churches and religious buildings that dominated the city layout. The bells set the rhythm of the day, not the clock, the sound. The church didn't just organize spiritual life, it also handled social services, education, and part of the healthcare system. One of the biggest events of the era was the fire at the Royal Alcázar in 1734. Until then, that building had been the royal residence inherited from the Habsburg period. Its destruction was a turning point. In its place, construction began on the current royal palace, a building that reflected the new Bourbon vision of power, more orderly, more monumental, more European. physical change, visual change. Daily life started very early. Before dawn, bakers, street vendors, and water carriers were already on the move. Water didn't come to the houses. Madrid relied on something called viajes de agua, a limited underground network that couldn't meet the whole demand. That's why water carriers were essential to everyday life. Without them, the city couldn't function. Sanitation was terrible. There was no modern sewer system, so trash piled up in the streets or was just tossed out of windows. The result was constant dirt, stench, and disease. Epidemics were fairly common. They were just part of urban life, especially in the more crowded neighborhoods. Getting around the city was tough. Most people walked. Carriages were reserved for the upper classes, but even they had trouble because of the street layout. Narrow streets, slow traffic, getting anywhere took time. At nightfall, Madrid completely changed. Lighting was scarce and uneven. A few oil lamps here and there, but large areas were pitch black. Visibility vanished. There were constables, but nighttime security was limited. Crime went up. Not so much dramatic duels, like people sometimes imagine, but muggings and random fights. The night had its own rules. Cultural life was starting to take hold. Corrales de comedias, open-air theaters, put on plays for mixed audiences, though people were separated by social class. Same show, different experience. Madrid was beginning to define itself as a cultural center, but one deeply marked by inequality. Food also showed the divide. The upper classes could afford meat, fish, and a variety of products. Most people couldn't. Bread, legumes, and wine made up the bulk of most people's diets. Simple, repetitive, at the mercy of prices. Guilds organized all the craft work. Trades like carpentry, blacksmithing, or tailoring were governed by strict rules that controlled production and training. Apprentices started young. Your trade decided your future. Despite all these limitations, Madrid kept growing. The presence of the court drew people from all over, creating a diverse city in constant flux. A city that never stopped expanding, and as you walk through it, what you really understand isn't just its layout or its history. It's the constant balancing act it lived on, a capital that depended on the outside just to survive, one that changed politically faster than it could physically adapt, and where, far from the palace drawing rooms, most of its people weren't living in the splendor of the era. They were holding it up, outro. And in the end, when all the noise fades away in your imagination, one simple, powerful truth remains. Madrid wasn't just a capital. It was a city that forced thousands of lives to learn how to exist somewhere between the glitter of power and the rawness of survival. But that's where our trip into the past ends. Let me know. Do you think you would have survived in Madrid 300 years ago? Drop it in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through time, hit like, subscribe to Reconstructed History so you never miss a trip, and click on this video if you want to keep uncovering the best kept secrets of our past.